Right, the next little section I'm going to talk about is 5 of the most important attributes. And I'm going to do them in rank order from the most important to least important. You could argue that these are the 5 most important in the game. All of them could arguably take the top spot. I don't know which one you'd put there. I can see a strong argument for all of them, but we'll go through them. Now, these aren't the only ones. There are other ones that are powerful, but it's these 5. Pace, acceleration, off the ball, position, and work rate. I'm going to start speaking about pace first of all. So, the match takes place on a 2D pitch. And basically, every single player, every single tick, the first thing they do is they traverse the pitch in some way, right? They traverse the pitch in some way. So, what they generally do is, depending on where the ball is and depending on what your whib and wob instructions are, that will tell you where the player is going to head. And obviously, the higher the player's pace, the quicker they are going to get there. So the distance that a guy with 20 pace and 20 acceleration can move in one tick is obviously much bigger than the position that a player with 3 pace and 3 acceleration can move in one tick. So after one tick, my right back could be here, and my left back would only be here. So pace and acceleration, essentially, like it does in real life, determines where the player goes to. And the higher the pace and the acceleration, the more distance they can travel. I think acceleration is dependent upon pace. So your acceleration, if your pace is 3 and your acceleration is 20, you get up to 3 pace very quickly. If your acceleration is 5 and your pace is 15, you get to 15 and you're eventually quicker than the person of pace of 3. But I don't think it happens linearly. I think every tick the acceleration increases until max pace. So I think 20 does 1 pace per tick or something like that. Might be 2 pace per tick. I don't know the exact way the calculation works with each other. If I did, I'd be even more accurate for this. So that's on each tick. There's this recalculation. Now the off the ball and positioning sort of work in tandem with your whib wob. Now let's say this is the positions that you want when the opponents have got the ball here, right? So your players are ostensibly in these positions. They're stood in these positions, but they don't stand there. They use these ideas, positioning and off the ball, to sort of. So let me put the circle of influence around this guy here. So if the ball's there, and this is a fast guy, and his circle of influence is sort of like this, and he's got low positioning, he's probably going to hold that position, right? That's position of 1. When they've got high positioning, they sort of take a position in their little circle. So this is the circle you'd want him in, and this is what is allowed, and he stands, because he knows where the ball's going to be, he stands here, right? So he knows the ball's going to be there. So even if he's got low pace and low acceleration, it doesn't matter because he knows where the ball's going to be, so he will stand there. Let's say he's got terrible positioning but high pace. Well, if he's got high pace and it goes into his zone of influence, then he will go to the ball, and if his pace gets there first, he will get the ball first. So although position would be really nice and the player will be stood here and win it all immediately, we have a situation where with pace and acceleration and your circle of influence. So obviously, the more players you've got with these big circles, the more of the pitch that your team will pick the ball up in. But that's also true of positioning, because the more players that have got good positioning, the more players that will be stood in their allowed zone from where you've told them to do with their whip and their wob. So because he's allowed in this zone and his positioning's high, he'll stand where the ball's going to land. Same with for players coming through. If he hasn't got high positioning, but he's got high pace, then obviously it doesn't matter if he stands there. Now, if you've got high positioning and high pace, this guy, he knows he's going to be here, he knows this where the ball is, and in his tick, he has to get there, then obviously he's going to get there quicker. So when you've got high pace and high positioning, your players win the ball uncontested far more frequently. Now, off the ball works in a similar way. And so let's say that your midfielder here has got the ball, and your midfielder is going to play a pass. Now, I've not spoken about passing or like decisions, and he's going to play a pass that's going to essentially land over here. So your striker, if he's got terrible off the ball, he's just going to stand in this position. Oops. He's just going to stand in this position. He's not going to like adjust his position because he knows where the ball's going to go. So, but he's quite quick. So as soon as he sees the ball lands there, from his position, is off the ball of 1, which isn't very good off the ball. He's going to have to sprint from here to there. Now, if he's playing against a defender that's got pace of 1, obviously he's going to win that race, even though he's got low off the ball. However, if he's got high off the ball, he knows where the ball's going to land, and he's got his area that he's allowed to stand. Because the positions we put him in, they're not an exact area. They're allowed to wander. Like, they're allowed to be in the coordinates around. So his off the ball, he's already, before the ball's even landed, he's here because his off the ball's so good. And he's got 20 pace, so he's going to win the ball uncontested. So off the ball and positioning sort of work in tandem with pace and acceleration. So if you've got no off the ball or positioning, they'll stand in this position, they'll still win the ball through pace. So when you've got players that have got high pace, you'll be like, well, they work well in the system. When you've got players who've got high off the ball and no pace, they still work well in the system. Obviously, pace and off the ball, or pace and positioning, work really well together. And acceleration's like a multiplier of that. So let's talk about work rate. And work rate is something that I sort of underrated before I started looking at this. So every single tick, all of these calculations are done. Right, every single tick, one of these calculations is done. The thing that happens is work rate determines if your player has a missed tick. And a missed tick is basically one of the 2.25 seconds where your calculations don't happen. So let's say this player that's got all the pace in the world and all the off the ball has a low work rate. He could miss, so if he's got work rate 1, he could miss 3 ticks. And that means that he just stands in this position for 6 seconds. Now obviously, because the calculations, it's quite a lot of distance covered. So if he misses these, then he's not going to get the ball. If a fullback has low work rate and they miss a tick, a winger can be past them. If they miss 2 ticks, the winger can be in on goal. So work rate's really quite important. Now, I believe, I'm not absolutely certain, I believe that the defenders have fewer missed ticks than attackers, from what I understand. Although, again, this is all like for me trying to research and find out. I don't know how true that is. But work rate is basically how many ticks you miss. So that's all about like the position on the pitch, and it's these circles of influence. Now, in the next little bit, I'm going to try and explain how a lot of the other things work together. However, those 5 there are the key ones by a long way, and everything that I speak about next is sort of going to be based on that. So if that's the only thing that you take, then obviously that's enough. Okay, so I'm going to save this one and go on to the next one.